Agreed. Presenting reports of committees.
Speaker, on behalf of the Chairman of the Law Amendments Committee, I am directed to report that the committee has met and considered the following bills. Bills number 237, an act to amend Chapter 6 of the Acts of 1994-1995, the Maintenance and Enforcement Act. Bill number 250, an act to further discourage the theft of gasoline and diesel oil. Bill number 257, an act to amend Chapter 25 of the Acts of 1996, the Fisheries and Coastal Resources Act. The committee recommends these bills to the favorable consideration of the House with certain amendments.
Or these bills be referred to the Committee of the Whole House on Bills. The Honourable Government House Leader.
Mr. Speaker, further, on behalf of the Chairman of the Committee on Law Amendments, I am directed to report that the committee has met and considered the following bills. Bill number 270, an act respecting professional planners. Bill number 274, an act respecting the Society of Management Accountants of Nova Scotia. The committee recommends these bills to favorable consideration of the House without amendment.
Or these bills be referred to the Committee of the Whole House on Bills. The Honourable Government House Leader,
Speaker,
tomorrow's hours and order of business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the House to now rise to meet again on the morrow at the hour of 2 p.m. The House will sit from 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. or the completion of business for the day. And the order of business following question period, Mr. Speaker, will be public bills for third reading, public bills for in Committee of the Whole House, and other such matters, Mr. Speaker, as it will appear on the order paper tomorrow. For that, Mr. Speaker, I move the House to now rise.
Motion is the House adjourned to 2 p.m. tomorrow. Is it agreed? Agreed. All those in favour say aye. Countermanded nay. The motion is carried. House adjourned to 2 p.m. We've reached the moment of interruption. The subject of this evening's light debate submitted by the Honourable Minister of Energy. Be it resolved that all members acknowledge the energy efficiency and conservation are vital to Nova Scotia's future. The Honourable Minister of Energy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and appreciate this opportunity to almost build on some of the discussion that we've just had previously on the opposition bills for consideration here today. And because we've highlighted some of that, Mr. Speaker, I will curtail some of my commentary because I think we've covered some ground. And but it is an opportunity, Mr. Speaker, to yet highlight the importance and the significance of energy conservation and efficiency as part of the wider response and solution to deal with increased energy pressures on Nova Scotians, our businesses, our organizations. But also, it's an opportunity for us to now start planning in a much longer term way as a government and as I say, organization in this province when it comes to efficiency. And as Nova Scotians know, the province came forward and the government with a $35 million energy response this year with $25 million for the Keep the Heat program. That itself, even dealing with the immediate pressures this year on those most in need in Nova Scotia, we're able to expand that up to 73,000 households in the province in terms of eligibility, expanding by 25% the amount available to 250. That again was part of our effort to work and build on the initiatives by the Government of Canada in their energy response. At the same time, including energy saving kits, which with a $50 value can produce over $100 in savings for individual households. Working on a furnace tune-up, and that's very much important. Clean, efficient burning of the actual furnaces themselves is very important. And recognizing as well that we have to work with audits and helping households do that. Our wider energy and efficiency piece takes in a whole host of things and really builds again on what the Government of Canada has done so that we use every dollar that is available to government to leverage those opportunities. And we've had to balance that too, Mr. Speaker, and what we can do with the other pressures within government for those services that are very important to Nova Scotians. And that is making sure that our institutions, our hospitals, our nursing homes, our universities and schools, that all of those things, Mr. Speaker, are also get through potentially some of the crunch. Now, I must say it's very relieving to know and to note and hear the projections from Environment Canada that Mother Nature has been kinder to us than anticipated And that really, Mr. Speaker, is a blessing, because it's meant that furnaces and other heating devices have not been turned on to the degree that the savings that are available hopefully will mean that Nova Scotians everywhere will be able to adjust more easily to some of those pressures. But we have a long-term strategy that we have to employ, and that's why part of the government's budgeting process this year will be looking at, to a larger measure, integrating more fully conservation and efficiency pieces, and that is to enable Nova Scotians, especially going through, many would see as the construction season through the summer and when people are doing their home renovation projects, to building conservation. That's why we're working with the Nova Scotia Home Builders Associations and with Natural Resources Canada for new homes, and to incorporate those efficiency pieces and to incent that. That's why we're working to make sure that where we have a resource in this province, that we are investing and providing some incentives for people to use EPA or pellet stoves in their homes as an alternate source of heat. That's why, Mr. Speaker, we're making sure that we are putting incentives there to help seniors. And we recognize that a lot of seniors in an older province are living in older homes, which means a much different approach than those homes built in the post-80s, when energy efficiency measures would have come in from the last pressures that Nova Scotians and Canadians experience. Putting all those things into place is not one isolated task. It's not one isolated program. It's an integrated, diversified approach, and it's one that we have to be mindful of the limited resources of Nova Scotians at the same time, and build on the incentives that the Government of Canada and the program dollars they have, which is the same tax wallet that these dollars come from, to make sure we're working. And that's why there's, as I say, extra emphasis for seniors, and to help them and to provide them with extra resources to encourage them to make energy efficiency and conservation investments. That's why we're also working and across for anyone that applies to make sure we have more cleaner burning efficient furnace units in place, whether it's the full furnace or the burner itself. It can make a huge difference on both emissions but also on the actual burning of the unit, the amount of consumption that's there, and the amount of energy used to do that. So our government is very aware those challenges. No government in this country, no government I think in this world has been able to come up with the one solution, because there isn't one. And we have to be realistic and reasonable as a government in how we do that. I think we've been that. I think we've seen that the stakeholders in the community, that's why we've worked as well with regards to energy efficient promoting with non-government organizations to have demonstration projects for energy efficient vehicles. But it's not just merely putting an incentive program in. We've got to recognize the implications of that from a budgetary point of view and make sure that those pressures don't offset the needs of those in greatest need, and that's why we're making a demonstration project. In fact, Nova Scotians are already making those alternative choices now. We see it with purchasing practices. We're seeing it with the automotive makers as they're adjusting production lines, as they're producing more vehicles, and those that have the resources are buying more energy efficient vehicles, are buying hybrid vehicles, and helping to make sure that they're part of a solution, a broader solution. And the one thing we know now versus in probably the last time that there was an energy crunch is that world demand this time is increasing. When we see China, when we see what's happening in India, when we see overall world demand for energy source and supply, we cannot ignore the fact that that is going to put pressure in the long term on pricing, because it's putting pressure on demand and then production. So we have to make sure that we are putting those measures in place. We are being cognizant of the fact that the world conditions, the globe has changed, the economy has changed, the environment has changed. And that's why the government as well has built a greener energy framework and have worked with the Government of Canada, working with stakeholders, working with universities, hospitals, cities, communities, businesses, utilities. We're working to make sure we have an integrated, diversified energy mix here in the province. So all of that means as we do it, we have to have conservation efficiency, safe workplaces, more productive workplaces. All that comes to the base rate case. It also means freeing up resources that are going to be necessary to do that. And I know in discussions as well that my honourable colleague from Halifax, Shabukdo, is very cognizant of the challenges and also looks at opportunities and has presented some ideas. And I think, Mr. Speaker, that's what we need, is an engaged debate. And we're looking and welcoming one so that we can make those choices. And I fully expect, Mr. Speaker, that come the spring when we bring our budget forward, people will see that we've listened, that we've acted, and that we've integrated good ideas and good policy and within a good balanced budget approach. That's what we committed to do. That's what we'll continue to commit to do. And that's what Nova Scotians can take as an assurance. And we'll do it by leveraging every other opportunity that's out there to realize better outcomes. But it is about the long term and a long-term commitment. And that's what we recognize, and that's what we're committed to. And I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and the members of this House for this opportunity.
Thank you. Recognize the honourable member for Halifax Shabakto.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. There is something of the bad smell of piety about this resolution this evening. I say this because it has something of the odor of self-congratulation about it. And that doesn't appear on the face of the resolution. It has to do with really the nature of what it is that the Honourable Minister has to say about his own government's efforts. Because who indeed can disagree with the bare face of the wording of this resolution? Let's remind ourselves of the wording. Be it resolved that all members acknowledge, and I emphasize that word acknowledge, that energy efficiency and conservation are vital to Nova Scotia's future. Well, the issue, of course, isn't who's going to acknowledge that this is important. The issue is, are we doing anything about it? And if we're doing anything about it, are we doing the right things? And are we doing enough of the right things? And more importantly, are we doing them quickly enough? Because that's really the issue. The issue is the time frame within which we begin to take action in order to engage with energy issues. It was widely speculated that this fall's session of the legislature would be almost completely taken up with energy issues. And I know for our part, our caucus has asked about 10 questions in question period so far about energy issues. We brought in 3 bills. If I had my druthers, we'd be doing more, but when I compare what our caucus has done with the government and with the opposition, the third party, I see that we're well ahead when it comes to that. But what's missing, I think, from the comments of the minister and what's been missing from the tone of debate and discussion so far in this autumn session has been any sense of urgency, because this is an urgent problem. This is not a casual problem. It's not a problem that we have the leisure to deal with whenever we feel like it. It's not something we can take up from time to time and let go on some other occasions. Mr. Speaker, I was at a reception last week and fell into conversation with the Honourable Member for Kings North. And he reminded me that there is a wonderful book that was published as a result of the Massey Lectures last year. And the book is called A Short History of Progress. It's by Ronald Wright. He asked me if I'd read it. He was recommending it to me. And indeed, a week ago I hadn't read it, although I'd heard most of the lectures when they were given and broadcast on the radio. I took the opportunity this weekend to read that book, which had been at my bedside, and I had been meaning to read it for some time. Mr. Speaker, here's what Ronald Wright, who is an historian and an archaeologist, has to say. He points out that civilizations in the past have arisen, developed, matured, and fallen away in many occasions primarily because they failed to take account of the essential life support systems that they had to have in place so that they could continue to exist. And he lays out example time after time on all continents, in North America, South America, in the Middle East, in Asia, in Europe. There is no reason to think that we are any smarter than they were. And he points out that we are fast bringing on conditions that will lead to our extinction. And if they don't lead to our extinction, they're very likely to lead to a severe modification of the conditions within which we can carry on life. And there are already 6 billion people on the earth, and it's far from clear, says Wright, that the conditions changed will allow that many people to survive. And what he points to, of course, is global climate change, and what that has to do primarily with is energy. And that's the point at which we have to pay attention to the question of urgency, because this problem, as I said, is not a casual one. This is an urgent one. It's a question of our life support systems. If we don't engage actively, seriously, and unrelentingly in all possible ways, then there is no reason to think that we will happily survive as a species, or if we do, that nearly so many of us will be able to survive. And Wright, of course, is not alone in saying this. One can read any serious commentary these days, and the warnings are out there. We will never have the chance to say that we didn't know. We knew. We knew and have known for decades that this is a crisis and that this is something that is urgent and it's something that we ought to be doing something about. Indeed, we ought to be using every ounce of our ingenuity in order to tackle energy questions. The problem is, how do we change human behavior? And even if individuals are prepared to change their behavior when it comes to the main categories of energy use, that is to say, transportation, electricity, and heating, how do systems get changed? Because there's a limit to what people can do as individuals. We can be careful in our homes if we want to turn out the lights or buy energy-efficient appliances, as it's sometimes suggested to us. Or when it comes to transportation, of course, we know the best thing we can do is not own a car. If you own a car, don't drive it. If you do have to drive it in the most efficient way that you can. When it comes to heating, insulate your homes. We know all of these things. We know them. We know all of these things, and yet we need systems as a society to help us achieve the objectives. People cannot do it on their own. Think about transportation. Although there are things people can do, they can walk, they can bike, they can minimize their vehicle use. If there isn't mass transit available, then in fact, that's a limit in the system that's available for them to use. What about electricity? People can minimize the amount of electricity they use if they try, but at the same time, the issue is, what's the nature of the system that surrounds them? What's the nature of the system that they tap into? Are we building a system that in fact will help people to minimize their energy use? And it's not because we're looking to go for a simpler life and a happier life. And I mean, that would be wonderful, but that's not everyone's value choice. The issue is the consequences of not doing this. The issue is that we are polluting our atmosphere, causing global change, global climate change, and of course having direct negative impacts on our health. All of these are of crisis proportions, and we're not doing nearly enough. Even if this government were to formally accept, say, the Kyoto targets, it's not enough. It's not enough because the Kyoto target is only minus 6% in terms of greenhouse gas emissions below 1990 levels. That's already way too small a number. It was way too small when the Kyoto Accord was agreed to. And it's growing in terms of its inadequacy every year. The current estimates are that if we are going to try to stabilize greenhouse gas emissions and the percentage of CO2 in the atmosphere, the world will have to be 60% below 1990 levels by 2050. Now that's a big target, and we're not moving nearly rapidly enough towards it. Situation gets bleaker and bleaker. When I think about what it is that we hear from our government and from other provincial governments around Canada, I am appalled. I'm appalled because the opportunities are not being grasped. I don't think I'm in a position, and I don't know that anyone in this House is really in a position to answer the engineering questions. I've frequently observed that it's a real lack in this House and in similar bodies that we don't have more people who are scientifically and engineering, have science and engineering training. That might help us grapple with these questions. But you know what? I don't think it's really government's job to solve the technological problems. What we have to do is set a direction. We have to identify the problem and say, there are way too many greenhouse gases, we've got to stop it, and leave it to the experts, the power corporations, the small companies, and those who have that expertise to come up with the answers. So far, we are tinkering. So far, what can be said is that we are beginning to turn our minds to the questions, but in the simplest and earliest stages of it. Mr. Speaker, one is appalled when one looks at what the opportunities are for change compared with what's happened so far. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that there is some kind of technological fix that is actually invented soon for the energy problems, But I read around this quite widely, and I don't see it coming. We'll see. Perhaps our children will see. They're the ones who will really have to grapple with this. In any event, I think that what we really have to say to ourselves is that this problem is of crisis proportions, it's urgent, and that all of our energies should be focused on dealing with it. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, members taking part in this debate this evening. The House is adjourned to 2 p.m. tomorrow.